And the next subject is a bit of a doozy. It's trans legal recognition in Australia. So, Rachel, what I'm actually going to ask you to do is go last, because then you'll be able to respond with great knowledge into what other people say. So, Jasmine, I believe that you had something that you wanted to say in this topic.
Legal recognition of my identity was, as I mentioned earlier, a crucial part of my confidence. For a long time, I was going out and presenting as a female, and I was stuck with a male driver's license, and I was stuck with a male Medicare card, and it just made everything harder, because I felt like I was being told by the legal system, no, you're wrong, you actually don't know who you are, and I just thought that wasn't appropriate. So focusing on the equality across the country. I mean, ACT has introduced its legislation, which is far more beneficial for the trans community. That needs to be a national thing. It's necessary for our health and well-being, and who's anyone else to tell us what we are when it comes down to it?
Yes, it's another way in which trans people can get erased, and very severely. Now, I realise that I wrote Jay there, so it might have been Joanna as well. Did you want to say something about...
Could you repeat the question, just because it was kind of...
Yeah, it's a topic really, Joanna. It's trans legal recognition in Australia. Trans
legal recognition. You know, for myself, my transition is only 18 months. That's as long as I've been going. But I have always been somebody that moved very quickly. So 6 months on hormones, I jumped straight out into public and went, hi, I'm here. And started getting all of my paperwork together. And I actually found it fairly easy to get my driver's license, Medicare card, get the banking all done. But I didn't do it just because I wanted it, but as you said, because you need it for people to live full-time female and walk up and go, you know, and hand over a license or even a bank card that had my male name on it, and people just look at you, and the instant judgment, you just want to smack the smirk off their face, you know, because it's like you can't actually live that way. But, you know, anybody put in a situation where you don't know what to expect or you don't know how to do it is always going to be pretty tough to get through. But I think I've been spending some time at Parliament House, and we're actually starting a transgender lobbyist group here in New South Wales. And those are some of the things that are actually coming forward. And those topics in Parliament are already floating to the top and being understood that, you know, we need to take care of these people because, number one, they are people and they are citizens. And Parliament right now, because they're in re-election, goes, and they vote.
Yes, that's right. And I remember Peter Hindle saying at one of the conferences really loudly, it's not about what we're not getting, it's the fact that as trans people we have the same rights as everybody else. And that was the point that he was making.
Can I say something briefly?
Yes, please.
I worked with the Road and Maritime Services of New South Wales, so I became the first person in New South Wales to be registered as gender non-specific through them. And I think the legal stuff and that kind of is really important. And there's no other paperwork in my gender that reflects who I am, as much as I've changed my name and stuff. And I understand handing over your bank card and they're reading me as male, but it's still got a female pronoun on it and things like that. It's just to have to deal with that, you know, all that stuff is, yeah, it's really important.
Yeah, thank you.
Just in terms of that, in terms of the legal transition, having laws that are federal and that are state-based is so confusing for someone who doesn't know anything about the law. Thankfully, a lot of stuff has happened federally around the West Australia case and around the work of OII Australia that has made it much easier for us to get our passports, which allows us to change Medicare and things like that. So in the last couple of years, there has been some amazing work done. But, you know, state-based stuff in New South Wales, I'm still female. And like, you know, like my license doesn't have a gender on it, but every time you get pulled over, the cops put your name into the computer to see if you've got any speeding fines, and it comes up with my birth name and my gender. So any time that happens, I have to... Yeah. So, you know, there's like still a long way to go in terms of the law and allowing people to affirm their documents. You know, and even, sorry, the other thing is I'm still trying to get all of my super rolled over into one account, and that is a nightmare.
And
just to go
I know
back,
people who can help you.
thank you for that.
Excellent. I love this panel.
Aram, I just wanted to ask you, given your work with policy and government, where do you think it is regarding trans legal recognition?
Well, I think as Xavier said, we've made quite a lot of progress in the last kind of 5 years, which is great. But Australia is so far behind in the context of a lot of other countries around the world. We still have incredibly restrictive laws in terms of a lot of their requirements for surgery and other medical intervention. And the bit that I find appalling and which still sometimes surprises people is the divorce requirements that still exist in the majority of legislation. They say if you were previously married and then you transitioned, well, you have to choose between keeping your marriage or having your new identity legally recognised, and that's just appalling. So at the least, we need those divorce provisions removed from every single law around Australia. The ACT's done that, which is great, and I understand there's interest in Victoria and New South Wales. But the law should be uniform across every single state. It's ridiculous that is different from state to state. I often wonder if there's a constitutional kind of question in there about people being treated differently depending on where they live.
Or where they were born.
Or where they were born, yes.
Yeah.
And I personally am very strongly of the view that there should be no mandated requirements for particular medical interventions. That's not the way it works in lots of other parts of the world, and the world has not collapsed in on itself in any of those places. So I'm pretty confident the sky won't fall here. And I find it particularly kind of ironic in that there is no such, to the best of my knowledge, not being a lawyer, so if Rachel, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that the concept of man or woman or male or female is actually legally defined in the law as a thing. So we have all these laws about, well, if you're going to change, this is the hoops you've got to jump through, but if you just are, then the law doesn't get too hung up on about it. And when we're born, a doctor takes one look and goes, it's a boy, it's a girl, and that's good enough for everyone from there forward. So then why it should be so complicated if you decide that the doctor's opinion was wrong when you came out is kind of beyond me.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe we could ask for a second opinion.
Well, let's get Rachel's opinion now.
Well, this is a hot topic. It's not a hot topic with lawyers, however, but it's a hot topic in terms of people who experience this kind of difference. How to break it down for a few minutes is just outstanding. And of course, as a lawyer, I think I have different opinions. But firstly, there's two types of legal identity that we're talking about. One is gender expression, or two types of rights. One is about gender expression, and that's undeveloped in Australia. I'm of the view that many of the problems that have been outlined on the panel here and that people are no doubt familiar with could be addressed if we just simply had uniform Australia-wide recognition of the human right of free gender expression. And that would be for everybody. It wouldn't just be for trans people or for this person or for that. It would be every man and their dog would have the right to express gender in any way that suited them from time to time, because gender expression is meant to be fluid. It's a fluid concept. And I personally think you run into problems if you try to corral that fluid right into a legal identity system. Now, legal sex has never been about self-identification, and it's never been about biological sex. It relates loosely to the latter. For the majority of the population, they have their legal sex determined by a quick inspection of their genitalia after they're born as infants. And that's it. No say, no self-expression about it. And they're locked into that. Now, if you break it all down, and I know I'm kind of crashing through the legal and the social issues.
You've got 1 minute, Rachel.
If you break it all down, And the tremendous case of AB and AH against the Western Australian government brought this out very clearly. Legal sex is really about male bodies. It's really about being able to identify someone legally and to know that they have male physical sexual potential and physical strength. That's what's important on the ground in the rest of the community. And so the question really is legal sex about bodies, which I submit it is, or is legal sex about self-identification or gender expression, and I submit it isn't. And if you confuse the two, you muddy the legal waters so much. Whatever you're going to do in any case has to sell to the general community. And they really do want to know, in women's refuges and other crises centres, they really want to know from the birth certificate point of view or from a legal identity point of view whether that person has legal male sexual potential and strength. And that's why it's much easier to gain reform, as I did in Re Kevin, gaining the right to marry for people in their affirmed sex. Much easier acting for affirmed male people in cases than it is for affirmed females. But I think I've done my minute, but
good on you.
That's just scratching the surface of the complexity.
Yes, and probably not even that, Rachel. I appreciate that. Thank you. We're going